This is News Talk 980 CKNW.
The Linda Steele Show at News Talk 980 CKNW. Drex filling in for Linda for the next few days. All right, so at any given week, and there's even more talk of the dangers of the Vancouver hot housing market. Now, both the Bank of Nova Scotia and the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development are now the latest to demand that the federal government start taking some action on this. With more on this, I'm joined by the host of Canada's #1 rated financial show, Money Talks, Michael Campbell, on the phone. Mike, Finance Minister Bill Morneau says the government is digging deep into the issue to make sure that any action it takes are evidence-based. It's kind of weird to hear them just say they're going to dig into the numbers here. What are we looking at?
Well, you're absolutely right, because this has certainly been an ongoing problem. But there's several things to be aware of here, and what makes it difficult for the federal level. And number one is this is not a problem in Saskatchewan or Winnipeg, Montreal. In Alberta, they're actually begging for higher prices when you talk about Calgary and Edmonton and Red Deer and places like that. The second thing is that is the nature of the problem, because any federal policy has to cover the country, and it can't be just specific to Toronto or Vancouver. So it's certainly not going to work if you're trying to cool down Vancouver and Toronto. That's not going to work for Calgary and Edmonton or Grand Forks. And next one is in Vancouver. At a minimum, you better divide the real estate market. I actually don't like the sort of blanket statement about the real estate market. You've got an entry-level market. You've got a mid-range market. You've got an upper end. And there are different dynamics, though, different demand factors, different supply constraints. For example, in 2014, I was looking at a report that said that about 29% of the sales that year were affordable, only 29%. But when it came to single detached, zero were. So obviously different markets there. And, we also got to admit, the federal government has also played a huge part with our record low interest rates, especially in the entry level. They've also played a big part with their immigrant investor programs. And I'm thinking that Quebec has their own program, and the stats make it very clear. They come to Quebec and then they move to Vancouver. So there's lots of aspects to this.
So what are some of the other challenges here for government action? And I guess at any level, too. What are we looking at?
Yeah, well, let me start with this. And that's another question to be asked, because you're not going to implement a policy and not have any consequences. So we better ask, do we really want to slow down the most dynamic sector in the country? Canada created, Drex, 144,000 jobs last year. 110,000 were in BC, and the major share were in construction and sort of the ripple industries like, Home Depot and stuff like that in the retail side. So, and it's not like the government can dial specifics there. There's this sort of myth out there that the government controls the economy. No, it's usually very heavy-handed. So I think that's the first thing to be part of the discussion. Do we really want to shut down this market? And I'm just saying that's part of the consequences here. Another one, and there's a lot of the talk right now, Drex, is about increasing down payments. Fair enough. That could dampen demand, which could, ease off the market. But who are you hurting there? You're hurting first-time buyers. We had a report we chatted about a couple of weeks ago that shows that it took 23 years for people between the ages of 25 and 34 to save for a down payment. So now we're talking about making that longer? And the other thing is, I don't think the size of the down payment is the problem. I don't think it's the motivator there. Certainly if you change mortgage rules, it could help the lenders, and you could argue it may save some people from themselves. But I don't think it's going to help people getting the market, and I don't think it'll slow the market down unless it's some sort of huge increase in down payment requirements.
Now, Michael, we're not the only country with this problem around the world of sharply rising prices in major cities. Any other countries suffering from this?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It is quite interesting if you read the local news in Melbourne or Sydney, Singapore, right down the California coast. This is more recent here in the last year or so, into Seattle now. And, of course, it's been a long time in New York and London. Nothing's affordable there. And the principal part has been because of foreign buying. In the first 6 months after Ukraine was invaded in 2014, $64 billion moved from Ukraine into the London real estate market. So, no, it's not ours. And then you start looking at what they did about it. Australia is very interesting because they put in foreign ownership restrictions for non-residents. But bottom line is it didn't work. It's just simply too easy to get around those kinds of regulations. All you need to do is to get somebody who's willing to put it in their name or register a company in Australia and have them buy the real estate. So that has not been effective there. Singapore put on a major speculation tax. I think it was 33%. It still didn't have a ton of impact. So, and largely because there's so many aspects to the buying side. I think the biggest demand at the mid and upper levels of the market has been a huge amount of foreign buying coming in, but it's to move money out of their country, just like I described with the Ukraine. They want to move money out. It's a safety deposit box. It's another form of wealth outside of their jurisdiction. So they're not really there speculating, but they're there, with demand, and that pushes prices up.
What can you tell us about some of the apparently dirty money coming into our country?
Well, that's certainly a worry. I mean, I was looking at, some of the things that are discussed by FinTech, which is looking at the different organizations, or the different real estate companies, and they found they were very deficient when they had a look at that. That like half of the companies they audited didn't know the identity of the buyer or where the money came from. Again, a tough thing, though, because there's not big real estate firms. You may recognize a firm like Royal LePage or Remax, that kind of thing. But the actual model is for individuals to work with them, maybe push paperwork through them, but they're pretty much individuals working on their own. Well, they're not going to start a major investigation into where the money came from. I mean, it's not practical. They don't have the staff to do that. So that's another. I mean, we'd all love it if that dirty money, whatever nature of it is, maybe that's what Finance Minister Morneau is trying to figure out what percentage of the market. But we'd love it if it wasn't there. I'm just saying it's very difficult to track.
So what can we do in the end here?
Well, I think we have to look at the supply side. I mean, if the demand side we talked about for a minute there, but the supply side is this, and it's not easy because we're talking about increasing housing density, making more supply available. But then the other side of that, you may change the character of some of the neighborhoods. You can give incentives to build rental housing because I'll tell you right now, I mean, rents have not moved up in proportion with prices, so it's not really advantageous to build rental accommodations. It's better to build stuff and sell it. So we got to provide some incentives to build some rental housing at this point. And I'll finish with one that's very controversial. We've got a lot of land tied up in the agricultural land reserve. What I'm saying is what has to be looked at is some of that land is not agricultural. It may be in that reserve, but it's not going to ever be used for farming. That may free up some more property so we can build more residences. That should be put on the table, but I suspect that no politician wants to touch it.
Michael Campbell is the host of Canada's #1 rated financial show, Money Talks, weekends here on CKNW. Mike, always a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thanks, Drex.
More of the Linda Steele Show on the other side of this short break here at News Talk 980. CKNW.
Vancouver's News, Vancouver's Talk. This is News Talk 980, CKNW.